Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We keep the benches for those who actually need them, like Nakshatri needs to sit on a bench. Shrisha, I don't think you need to. Also, young man. Okay. 30? Well, to me, you're young. Okay. Ananta Shesh, full of energy for so many years, lifting up big pots. Time takes its toll. So, Hare Krishna. Questions and answers.
Hare Krishna.
Shrotavyadini Rajendra Nrinang Santi Sahasrashaha Apashyatam Atmatattvam Griheshu Grihamedhinam. Questions and answers in relation to the absolute truth. Please.
So there are quite some questions here. Some are general, some are more specific. But we'll start with one very interesting question. Question about questions. Is the failure to regularly ask your spiritual master questions reflective of false ego or a clear understanding of the spiritual master's mood and mission?
You first. Presumably it should be.
Well, who asked the question? Is not failure to ask questions? Well, even the birds and bees are asking questions. Is there some translation that has to go on, or?
They'll go on simultaneously.
Okay. So even the birds and bees are asking questions. The question is, what kind of question we're asking? Now, just to sit, as I said this morning, just to sit here and listen implies a question. The question is, what is he going to say? Everyone who's sitting here is wondering what's going on. What is being questioned, what's the answer are. So there's inquisitiveness just to come and sit and listen. As far as someone understand the mood and mission of the spiritual master, well, I guess if you read Prabhupada's books, you could probably understand the mood and the mission of the spiritual master. Hopefully that's the mood and the mission of the spiritual master is in Prabhupada's books. And if you don't read Prabhupada's books, and you don't hear from Prabhupada's representatives, and you think you know the mood and mission, good luck. Either you can read minds, or you're self-realized, or maybe both. In any case, I have no idea how anyone can know the mood and the mission of Krishna and his representatives without hearing from them. So that has to be implied that one is actually hearing from them, and therefore that's how we know. We don't know usually by divine intervention, we know by hearing. And by inquiry, as I said before, there's 5 levels of understanding. The first level is to just hear superficially. The second level is to assimilate the knowledge so that we get the same perspective as Krishna's perspective. And the third level is we become, by experience, convinced that this is actually reality by practical experience. And the fourth level is we refine our skills and we become expert at fulfilling that mission and vision. And the fifth level is it becomes our nature, our inherent nature. We become part of that mission and vision and mission. We develop the character of a pure devotee. So there may be different levels of understanding, but only when we actually come to develop the pure character of a pure devotee can we purely understand the vision and mission of a pure devotee. Hare Krishna.
This is specifically mentioned for Bhakti BVKS Maharaja. Question for Bhakti BVKS Maharaja. If a devotee cannot control his senses and is breaking regulative principles, does he go to hell?
A devotee doesn't regularly break the regulated principles. The devotee follows what is given by Krishna. Whether he goes to hell or not is up to Krishna. The general rule is that if one is sinful, one goes to hell. But Krishna has made another rule that if you approach me, I will deliver you. Swalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Even a little execution of devotional service can save one from the greatest type of fear. If one thinks I will commit sinful activities and Krishna will save me, then such a person, even Yamaraj cannot purify him. That is stated. His mentality is so perverse, which means even if he goes to hell, there's no point in going there. The real question should not be, how do I avoid going to hell? The real question should be, how can I please Krishna? If we're trying to please Krishna, we're struggling. Everyone is struggling. Krishna will be kind to those who are sincere, no doubt. But at the same time, we are warned not to sin on the strength of devotional service. So whether one goes to hell or not, that is ultimately up to Krishna. The general rule is you go to hell by breaking the regulated principles. Another rule is one is saved by devotional service. Exactly what happens in each case, that's up to Krishna. Hare Krishna Maharaj. But our thought should not be how to avoid hell so much as how can I please Krishna? How can I get the help to stop breaking the regulated principles? It's almost as if the question is saying, I'm going to go on for breaking the regulated principles. Can I get away with it? But that's the wrong kind of question altogether. We can be uplifted by Krishna consciousness. It's not hopeless, it's always hopeful.
So we have another microphone, we'll just arrange it. So another question is how to be conscious in Krishna consciousness.
Hare Krishna. Well, be thoughtful. Thoughtful man take to Krishna consciousness. How to be. One may have to be, one may have to be a little bit reflective as to what we're doing. No, I think well, keep how to be conscious. Well, to be Krishna conscious, consciously Krishna conscious. Well, that we can ask, if we do a thing in a mechanic way, then we can say then it only brings us so far. At the same time, we maybe do things. we do 16 rounds, or consciously do actually 16 rounds is not the end of the story, but is in a way beginning. So to do it, well, not in a mechanical way, but in a loving way, with love, with attention. Something. If you have love, then we put our heart into it, and we are really concerned to see that the beloved one get it as, or that we really please the object of our service. So be affectionate to the Lord. Yes, be conscious that it is for the Lord and not for my own sense gratification. And so chanting the holy name in the Lord in a serving mood. And we can say that we're the servants of the Lord, but loving servants. Okay, then keeping association, good association, and things like that is part of it. Okay, Hare Krishna. Something more.
How should one address devotees that lie in a way that is conducive for both individuals' devotional life? I'm not sure that I understood.
Which language is this in? How should one address devotees that lie?
Maybe it's supposed to be live in a way. Maybe it's misspelled.
In a way that is conducive for both individuals.
Maybe it's supposed to be live. Who asked the question? It's not clear what the question means. Whoever asked it could maybe clarify. Otherwise, we'll go on to the next one.
Yeah. How to control the mind.
And by orders, yes.
Chanchalam himana Krishna pramati balavadridam tasyaham nigraham manye vayor eva siddhiskuram. So, I can't say anything better than Krishna says. Shri Bhagavana Vacha asamchaya mahabaho vino durnigraham chalam abhyasena tikontiya vairagena chagriyate. It is very difficult to curb the restless mind, undoubtedly, Arjuna, but it's possible by suitable practice and by detachment. Asamya tatmana yogo dushprapyati memati vashatmana tu yatata vasho bhaktu upayata. For one whose mind is unbridled, self-realization is difficult work, but he whose mind is controlled and who strives by right means is assured of success. So Krishna says, vairagya and abhyasa, suitable practice, follow the principles of Bhakti Yoga, and knowledge, so we see things properly with transcendental vision, so that we don't become attracted to the objects of the senses. Instead, we see everyone and everything in relation to Krishna as an object of service rather than exploitation. Then Krishna will control the mind. What is Krishna? Evam bude param bhutva samstabhyatmanam atmana ehi shatru mahabaho kamarupam darasatam. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to material senses, mind, and intelligence, one should control the lower self by the higher, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. So, if we take shelter of Krishna, then Krishna will put us under the control of the Daivi Prakriti, the spiritual energy, and then the mind will naturally be controlled. The senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is actually before that. Tasmat evam, tasmat.
Or you looking
That
for
is,
Indriyani Manobuddhi?
the one before that. That Indriyani Manobuddhir astadistanam uchate eteravi mahatyatesham jnanam vritti dehinam. That the senses, mind, and intelligence are sitting places of lust, which veils the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders them. Tasmat tvam indriyanyado niyamnam bharatar shiva papmanam prajihi enam jnanam vijnananashidham. Therefore, Arjuna, at the very beginning, regulate the senses by devotional service and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. The working senses is superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is higher than the mind. And he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental, the material senses, mind, and intelligence, one should control the lower self by the higher, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. So the easy way is to chant Hare Krishna.
How does one know whether their experience in practice of Krishna consciousness is sentimental or if it is devotional?
Sentimental means on the material platform without knowledge. Religion without philosophy is sentiment or sometimes fanaticism. So if the proper understanding is there, then one's sentiments can properly develop. If the proper understanding is not there, it's likely that one will be misled by one's emotions, and then so many misunderstandings or misapplications of devotional service will be taken as devotion, as is commonly seen in India many years ago. I didn't personally see, but I heard one of my godbrothers, he told me that he was told by a woman that she always thinks of Krishna as her child. She has a deity of child Krishna, and she watches television with him just like her own child. So that is an example of sentiment, feeling, but it's not based on what Krishna wants. Everything should be understood by the teachings of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, of which Shastra is the center.
How can we more surrender to Krishna when we are influenced by the three qualities of material nature?
It's your turn.
Okay, what do you say? How can read it again?
How can we more surrender more to Krishna when we are influenced by the three qualities of material nature?
Okay, how we can surrender more to Krishna in spite of the influence of the three modes of material nature. I will put it that way. Yes, well, good association, regulated devotional service, chanting Sravana Kirtana Vishnu Smaranam Parasevanam Achanam Vandanam Dansham Sakyam Atmanivedam. To regularly engage in these devotional activities, so they will make us get more out of the material energy of the three modes of material need, the lower modes. Yeah, what I say. Hare Krishna.
Should we publicly defend Vaishnava culture from world's accusations that we are a sect and manipulators?
From whose accusations?
World's accusation
The
means
world's
world is accusing us for being sect and
Has anyone ever met the world? It's very hard to defend yourself from the world. And how sect in Spanish means six. So when we were on book distribution in Spain, and people accuse us of being a sect, we say, no, we're more than six. We're at least seven. How to defend ourselves? Well, depends who's in the world. It's very hard to understand. Some people may accuse us of being a sect, or what was the other thing? What was the other allegation? Sect and
Manipulators.
Manipulators. Well, that's probably would say, well, if you're on book distribution, you manipulate people to give you a donation, take a book, then you're doing quite well. And if someone accuses of doing that, tell them if you join our movement, we can teach you how to do it too. As being a sect, well, we're a good sect. We're a benevolent sect. And if you join our sect, you'll become benevolent too. And if you join all the other sects, then you're lost, you're finished. So we advise you to join our sect because we're the good sect.
Question for Bhakti BVKS Maharaja. How should a mataji interact with her husband if she has a more strict practice in bhakti than him? Does she also submit to his standards and abandons hers so that she can maintain a cordial marriage as a dharma patni? If not, how does she address her husband's different mood and still be submissive?
These kind of questions are it's asked in a general way, but it's referring to a very personal situation. In such a personal situation, it's best to take advice from those who are intimately aware of your situation and of yourself and of the persons involved in it, because there are so many nuances in every situation. As a general principle, I always advise women devotees to follow bhakti dharma and stri dharma together. That is understood. Those two terms are understood in a general way by persons who speak Indian languages. So to follow the two together. And when I say that, because often married women ask me for some instruction, and I often give this instruction, and it's a general instruction, but they get the gist of it. Exactly how to implement it, we have to see. We know that Śrila Prabhupada, he cited the example of his sister, who was married to a man who was a flesh eater, and maybe broke some other principles also, and that although she never herself ate fish, which is almost universal among Bengalis, she would cook it against her principles, against her bhakti principles, but in line with her principles as a wife to satisfy her husband. So in this way she remained as a pure devotee of Krishna. No doubt she took advice maybe from her brother or other devotees in this regard, and it's best to do so in each case because every situation is different. But as a general principle, we try to balance the two, which might mean that there is some external compromise in our practice of bhakti. It might mean that. But that also shouldn't be done without taking advice and guidance from our devotional seniors. It's a very delicate thing. the alternative of breaking up a family or causing much disturbance in the family, that's also very disturbing to our devotional life and very disturbing to society. So it's a very delicate matter. Maybe that might be answered differently by devotees who are in the Western cultural ethos or Western lack of culture ethos. But still in many parts of the world, in India certainly, the maintaining the family institution is considered very important and is integral with practice of religion. Okay, I won't say more about this now.
Hare Krishna. When I didn't have children, I was focused on japa. Now it's really hard to go back. How to come back and get the taste again? Thank you.
A little louder. A little louder.
Hare Krishna.
That's the answer. That is the answer. Hare Krishna!
Hare Krishna!
Cry to Krishna.
That was a very short answer.
That's it.
Yes, well, it looks like it's. If you have had it and then you lost it, may be more difficult to get it back. But association with the devotees and the scripture, of course, then we from our point of view would say, well, but now it sounded like the children were grown up. Okay, there is children, there's difficulty, then the children grow up and some taste or determination was lost, but then one would think that, okay, now the children is more grown up, now there's more time. So we may have, yes, pray, to slowly pray from the heart to regain the taste, and make further progress in our spiritual life. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. How to stay steady in sadhana when there is so much service at the farm community?
Farm community. Yomam pashiti sarvatra sarvam chamayi pashiti tasyaham na pranashami na chame na pranashiti sarvabhutastamatmanam sarvabhutani chatmani ikshite yoga yuktatma sarvatra samadarshanaha. The true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized soul sees me everywhere. One who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I'm never lost to him, nor is he ever lost to me. So if we're in a farm community and we see in the heart of the cow, the dog eater, and if it happens to be an elephant, then we see with an equal vision, then we'll always be Krishna conscious. That's our sadhana, to always remember Krishna and never forget him. And if we're in the farm and we see cows and dogs and Brahmins, whatever, and we don't see Krishna, then we're lost. That's all. So the point is that if we're doing our service, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, if we're accepting that this farm doesn't belong to me, this body that I have doesn't belong to me, I don't belong to me, I belong to, everything belongs to Krishna, and right now I'm serving Krishna with his energies just to please him, then Krishna will appear to us in whatever we're doing. And if we don't have the attitude that I'm here as a servant in Krishna's place, in his land, and I'm here to serve him and to please him, then we'll never remember him, no matter how much we follow strictly sadhana. So of course we should chant Hare Krishna 16 rounds a day, especially if we're initiated, and we should follow the principles, and then we should go out, and if we're working with knowledge, hearing at least, coming to the class, Bhagavad Gita, in the evening, Srimad Bhagavatam, we hear how Krishna is the proprietor, how he's the enjoyer, and how he's the well-wisher and benefactor of everyone, and accept that and do our work in the spirit, as it says, Tasmara Sakta Saratam Abhyasa Yoga Yuktena Chetasananyagamina Paramam Purusham Divyam Yati Partha Nichintayam. Therefore, Arjuna, if you carry on your prescribed duty of fighting, at the same time you engage your mind and intelligence in me, you'll attain to me without any doubt. So if we work for Krishna, we hear about Krishna at least sufficiently that we can accept those three things. Everything here is Krishna's energy. Everyone and everything belongs to Krishna, including myself. And whatever I'm doing to please him, then Krishna will always help us, will appear before us in our memory, and he'll help us remember him by appearing before us, and therefore we'll have a perfect sadhana. But if we neglect even the minimum of hearing those three things, that Krishna is the proprietor, Krishna is the enjoyer, and Krishna is the benefactor, and we think ourselves independent, then it doesn't really matter how much you engage in strict sadhana. Krishna will never appear before one.
This question was actually addressed to Bhakti Vikas Maharaj. It was on the back, I didn't know. It's by Bhakti and Yelena.
So you do answer it again?
I mean, if you want to say.
I was recently asked the same question when I was in Kazan, Tatarstan. And I said, well, the question was, in the summer, we have so much work to do. And we have long, dark, cold winter. And I said, yeah, it's a dilemma because you only have a short growing season and there's a lot of work to do. We come to the farms to have more time for hearing and chanting. But I said that again, and I'll probably say this again and again in this series of questions and answers. Devotees ask general questions. They ask a question in a general way, which is actually specific to their situation. So we can give a general answer, but what you really have to do is all the devotees in the community and in the communities that I'm involved in, we have a lot of discussion about all the things we're doing and where we're going and all adjustments we need to make. And it has to be discussed that how we can keep the balance. Definitely we have to work more at certain seasons, but we don't just want to work, otherwise what's the point of coming here? And then between them, the devotees work out what's the best way to go forward and seeing to the future also, because if you're so much working, that means we probably don't have enough manpower, or we're doing more than we need to do, because in the proper setup, in the ideal setup, it shouldn't be that we're just working, then what's the point of coming to the farm at all? So that has to be, but then again, if you say, oh, what's the point of coming to the farm? I'm working, I don't have enough sadhana, I think I'll go away. But then we have to see the vision and the future, that these farm communities, they don't just spring up ideally out of nothing. It takes time it's going to take time to establish, maybe a generation. The pioneers, they have to be prepared to sacrifice. That's also there. So again, these are not questions that can be definitively answered in 2 or 3 lines. It requires deep discussion specific to the situation. One thing we see traditionally in the fields of India, not nowadays because people have tractors, but going behind the bulls, the men behind the bulls would be chanting, singing, maybe songs to Krishna or maybe some folk song, but we can sing the names of Krishna as we work. Hate kam karo, mukhe nam bolo. With your hands do work, with your mouth chant the holy name.
If we are naturally happiest serving Krishna, what inspired the envious nature which led to our fall down?
We are individuals, spirit souls, and we have a freedom of choice. So at some point, there was some decision made to go another way, so to say. The only thing, what I can say then is freedom of choice, misuse, but at the same time the individual soul, we're individuals, that's important. Krishna is the supreme individual. And we made a choice. That's what I say.
Are spiritual masters above the 4 defects of living being?
4 defects?
4 defects of living beings.
The spiritual master means that one is the master of spirit or one is the servant of spirit. As far as whether there are 3 types, as Prabhupada writes, that there not every spiritual one who's giving initiation or one who's giving instruction is necessarily above the 3 modes of material nature all the time. But the spiritual master is not necessarily free from the defects, but his instructions are perfect. In other words, the instructions that he gives are free from the 4 defects of cheating, illusion, mistakes, and imperfect senses. Now, if the instructions are perfect, that's all he has to do. Prabhupada said when we're talking about spiritual master, we're not just talking about those who give initiation. It's also those who give instructions. And for someone who's watching someone performing devotional service, they may take them as an example. Now the person may not be perfect, the devotee may not be perfect, who's giving the instructions and also performing devotional service, but the person who takes the instructions and follows them and appreciates those who are following Krishna's instructions, then that devotee will become perfect by following the perfect instructions. Even the Bhagavatam, I think it was Yamaraj, was saying that Narada Muni may know, Vyasadeva may know, etc., etc. So, or they may not know. But the perfect instructions, if we follow them, then at least we'll know.
This is for Bhakti BVKS Maharaja. I have Radha Krishna deities. I cannot maintain elaborate standard of their worship. What is the standard of worship below which one should never go while worshipping Radha Krishna?
How can I do as little as possible? Not a good question. When we're worshipping Radha and Krishna, we should know that they are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If we're going to start worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we should be able to do so in a proper way. Otherwise, better just to chant We can worship Radha and Krishna by chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. O Krishna, O energy of Krishna, Radha, please engage me in your service. That is the prescribed method for this Kali-yuga, which anyone can do in any time and any place and any circumstance. But in deity worship, there are many considerations. So before starting deity worship, we should see that we're able to maintain a proper standard. Otherwise, don't do it. You'll make offenses. If you're not able to maintain... Of course, there may be different persons who give different answers to this, but I would say, as you're asking me, as the question is exactly to me, directed to me, I would say if you can't worship Radha and Krishna properly, you know you're not worshipping properly, then you can respectfully offer them to someone who can worship them properly. And frankly, I hardly see anyone who's worshipping properly, even in our temples, or to speak of at home, or otherwise place them in a box and pray to them for the time when you're able to worship them properly. But it is very hard because it does require a very high standard. And modern life is not conducive for that. It requires offerings and aritis. There is what's called the home standard, but again, which is not as high as the temple standard. But then again, Śrila Prabhupada recommended if you're going to worship at home, then worship Gaurnitai, Jagannath, Subhadra, Baladev, and Radha Krishna requires very high standard. Otherwise we make offenses.
How do we always think of Krishna? When doing devotional service, my thoughts will be on many things. How do I control the mind to have Krishna in all my thoughts?
Well, one thing I remember reading from Śrila Prabhupada said we should think that what we're doing is given to us to do by Krishna. So if you can think it that way, then naturally go, well, for whom? Krishna's, it's Krishna's to say, okay then, well, but husband, whatever, wife, temple commander, well, not Krishna, no, but...
Can you look to see if
they
there are
are
any more which are specifically meant for me?
Yes.
There's
maybe
one
in some
right
way
there.
representing Krishna,
Quite a few.
like if you're in the temple. But then it means it comes from Krishna. And then we remember Krishna at the same time. Okay, for whom am I doing this? And then then in the daily work, remember that that this is coming from Krishna. Let's do it nicely for Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisance or glories to Śrila Prabhupada. I have two questions. This is for Prahladananda Maharaja. Regarding Kali-yuga, yesterday in the Bhagavad Gita class you said that we are at the beginning of Kali-yuga. My question is, when will Satya-yuga manifest itself in Kali-yuga? Is the Golden Age era does the Golden Age era manifest for the whole humanity, or will only the devotees be able to perceive it?
Well, Prabhupada said it's just like if you're in the middle of a rainstorm, that if you carry an umbrella you won't get wet. So Kali-yuga goes on for 427,000 more years. And anyone who's chanting Hare Krishna and sincerely following the principles of devotional service will be under the umbrella of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy. And everyone else is going to get drowned in Kali-yuga. Anyone who's not following the regular principles, especially those who are engaged in living in a society where cow killing is going on and illicit sex and intoxication, gambling, then Kali-yuga will take care of them nicely. And anyone who avoids these, who becomes austere and truthful and clean and merciful and chants Hare Krishna, then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will take care of them too. But don't worry, because many people will take shelter of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, especially when they see how horrible things get. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is arranging things, even in this time in Kali-yuga, to make sure everything is horrible enough that people have no other choice than to take shelter of him. Because now we're thinking, oh, everything's nice, there's the supermarket, there's the mall, we have our internet, we can just, we need something like pizza, we just punch in a few numbers and the pizza comes, we offer to our deity in the smartphone. The smartphone has the prayers, we don't even have to offer the pizza. Just tap in the prayers and they come and life is good. So as the smartphones get smarter and we get stupider, so Kali-yuga will advance and things will get more and more difficult, and then we'll be forced to surrender to the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because there won't be anything else to do. Therefore we can see in these so-called advanced countries, people are not interested in Krishna consciousness, or they don't take it seriously. There's too many alternatives, too many things to watch on television, too many friends on internet, on Facebook. But when things are taken away, then we'll have no choice but to, just like in the countries where they have less material opulence. I remember when I went to Poland the first times, that if you just put up a little sign, like Indradu Maharaj was doing his tour there, and he just put up a sign, and in a week he'd get hundreds of people coming to the program. And my tour, we put a sign up for one day, and we get 50, 60, 100 people coming to our little program. And now, if you advertise for 3 weeks with big signs, you may get a few people coming because they're too distracted by so many things. But that distraction is going away. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is taking care. There's going to be a big reset, and the only thing that's going to be left is the chanting of the holy names and simple living. Opulence will, first time I went to New Vrindavan in 1969, Kirtananda Swami at that time, he told me that Prabhupada is preaching that all we do is need a little land and a cow, and our whole economic problem is solved. So that time is coming. If we can get a little land and a cow, we'll be considered to be greatly opulent and rich. And then we can take advantage of chanting the holy names purely. There won't be anything to distract us, because there won't be anything to distract us.
Why does Krishna emanate his external potency or energy, Maya? Is it due to him fulfilling the desires of those who wish to enjoy without him? Yeah, that's one perspective, one answer. Śrila Prabhupada gave an example. The general example is that this material energy, the material world is like a prison house for criminals. So similarly, those who rebel against Krishna, they go to the prison house. Śrila Prabhupada gave the example that when a government sets up a new town, develops a new city, they'll also build a prison. There's no one specifically they have in mind to go to the prison, but it's understood that there will be persons who will misuse the independence that allows them to be a good citizen or a bad citizen, and some will choose to be bad citizens and will have to be put into the prison. So in the same way, the love being the ultimate principle, love for Krishna, necessitates that there be independence. And that there is independence presupposes that some will misuse that independence. Why they should do so is almost inconceivable. But some can do and will do, and therefore the material energy facilitates. There are two things. One is we're put in a place of suffering, and another thing is that Krishna facilitates the desires of those who want to try to enjoy without him, which is not possible, but he gives them the illusion of enjoying without him, which is all suffering. There's more than one question.
Which destinations in a spiritual world can achieve devotees who worship Krishna, and which destinations can be achieved by devotees from another spiritual sampradayas who practice other bona fide spiritual process?
Well, for my little understanding, as you worship Krishna, you go to Krishna. And the others, there's Vaikuntha. Vaikuntha, where Krishna in form of Narayan, 400, or residing and engaging in loving, affectionate relationship with his devotees. But there is clearly mentioned the Vaikuntha planets and Narayan. And they are satisfied there, but understood that the ultimate, the topmost platform is that of worshipping Radha Krishna in the Goloka Vrindavan. Hare Krishna.
I've heard the following anecdote about Maharaja Parikshit. Is it true? When Maharaja Parikshit when Maharaja Parikshit gave Kali places to stay, Kali entered into Parikshit's helmet that was made of gold. When Parikshit was offended by Shamika Rishi, Kali, being in his gold helmet, influenced Parikshit, causing him to garland the Rishi with a snake.
Next question.
But actually, that's from Mahabharata. There is such a.
Which Mahabharata? Anyhow, whatever.
Gangulis.
I can't say it's true. I can't say it's false. I have no idea.
After the disappearance of the spiritual master, how does one understand what books to read, what books he is not qualified to read?
Well, first of all, the spiritual master never disappears. The actual spiritual master is Krishna within the heart, and he's represented by so many different other spiritual masters. So if one doesn't know what to do, or what not to do, then one should ask people who know what to do. One time I asked Śrila Prabhupada, I said, if Krishna wants me to do something, or Krishna doesn't want me to do something, how will I know what Krishna wants me to do? Śrila Prabhupada looked at me and smiled and started to laugh. And he said, you won't know what to do. You'll do the wrong thing. So we should ask someone who knows what the right thing is, and then we can do the right thing.
Next question is, to put it briefly, someone wants to find a partner for their daughter and doesn't know what to do because they can't find anyone to help. So if you have a son who's looking for a Vaishnava daughter, I don't know how to contact because it's not signed.
There's quite a few Vaishnava daughters, so
Yeah.
if you can find a son, we can find
We're in a giggly mood here, but these are very grave topics, actually, concerning people's lives. Is there any system in this country or in Europe in general, Vaishnav marriage, what do they call it, bureau or something like that? Yeah, there are several. There are several I know in India where marriages are generally arranged, or traditionally have always been arranged. And I know that some devotees in the West who have taken to Krishna conscious culture, who are not from a background of Krishna conscious or Indian culture, who are also concerned with getting their children married. I was some devotees came to see me again in Tatarstan and said that now we're going to start looking for a husband for our daughter. I asked, how old is she? She's 12 years old. So they're looking. I think it was just now in England, someone told me also, marriage ages, they're allowed at 16, which is younger than India. So they're arranging like that. So, yeah, if there's marriage bureau, there should be some marriage bureau. Yeah. So you can contact Divya Prabandha Prabhu, whoever has asked this question, and he can guide you. It's not guaranteed that you're going to be fully satisfied with. Often people looking for a marriage partner, they have unreal expectations. But there is help available in this regard. It's not that you're hopeless. So please contact Divya Prabandha Prabhu and he can guide you to the next step in this regard. And I'm going to go pass water.
What is the purpose of taking to Krishna consciousness? Is it for us to chant, to follow these rules strictly, or what?
Yes. Well, the rules, to follow them strictly like that again, or for what purpose? We want love of Krishna. We want to know Krishna and love Krishna. So the rules are in themselves not exactly the goal. And the goal is Krishna. But the rules are important. What do we say? Means for us to reach that goal of loving Krishna and knowing Krishna. So that is the rules are okay. There are ways to reach a goal, and the goal is love of Krishna. Hare Krishna.
I've heard devotees say, it's a good beginning, that one can desire what their service will be in the spiritual world. As well, I have heard that one already has a position that they were in before they fall down. Which one is true? Both? To make appear position by desire seem karmic to me. What, how to, trying to understand the two, or the truth.
Well, the question is whether we came from the spiritual world and we had a certain service. So that implies that we had a certain rasa. So that generally, Prabhupada writes in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita in the introduction that everyone by nature has a certain relationship with Krishna or rasa. And one of five, either neutrality or service or friendship or parenthood or conjugal. And that's confirmed by Nitya Siddha, Krishna Bhakti Sarad Kavanoi, Shravanadi Shuddhachite Karya Udoy. That love for Krishna is dormant in everyone's heart. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema, Shravanadi Hoy. That by the process of hearing and chanting about Krishna, that original relationship is awakened. Now, in that five rasas, there is varieties of service, as explained in the Nectar of Devotion, that even amongst, for instance, fraternal Sakya rasa, there are many varieties of service to Krishna. Some devotees are very meek and humble, and they please Krishna by their simplicity. Some of them crack jokes with Krishna. Some of them are intimately, like the Priyanama Shakya, Sakas, are in-betweens, go-betweens between Krishna and the gopis. So there's a variety of service. So everyone who wants to do some service there, Krishna can find some place for you to serve there in one of those rasas. But generally speaking, everyone inherently is attracted to one of the rasas, and that's our eternal swarup. And that when we go back to the spiritual world, it's a question of not, generally speaking, of not developing a relationship with Krishna. It's remembering what our relationship with Krishna is and taking that up again. For instance, in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Gop Kamara, he was never, although he went from one planet to the next and ultimately even to the Vaikuntha, and he went to Ayodhya, he went to Dwarka, but he was never satisfied in serving all the different forms of Krishna. He was only satisfied when he finally made it back to Goloka Vrindavan and took up his role as a cowherd boy, and his position is, his name was Swarup, which is interesting. When he revived his original relation with Krishna and his original Swarup, then he was satisfied and happy, and he's there forever. So until we revive our original relation with Krishna, we'll never be satisfied. We'll always be striving for something different. And then when we have that original relation with Krishna, that will go on forever.
So there's another question. All disciples of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada remember a critical health condition in which was our spiritual master. Devotees of the whole world organized prayers and pray Krishna for his health and to stay a little bit longer on this planet. Śrila Prabhupada recovered by the mercy of the Lord Shri Krishna and continued his mission. So question is it possible to similarly pray, or is it possible if devotees organize prayer, begging Krishna for the health of any other spiritual master, for example, Kadamba Maharaj or someone else? Can Krishna reject this prayer? Can such spiritual master recover by the Krishna's mercy for the love of devotees?
That's your question.
I got distracted. So the question is whether we can pray in a similar way that we prayed for Prabhupada.
or to Krishna. Can Krishna, can the devotee or such a spiritual master recover by the strength of prayer of devotees? Can Krishna reciprocate to the prayers of the
Because
devotees?
if Prabhupada wants to, if Prabhupada wants to reciprocate, there's no problem for him to reciprocate. Now the question, if we're in a different situation in a way, that we're many spiritual. There are many spiritual masters, and then whom should I pray for? All of them, or there's some of them, and then of course that I believe much will be a personal thing. I mean, him whom is dear to me, I will pray for. I may pray for. And Krishna may help, but then from my point, I think Prabhupada asked or recommended that we could pray, but now for him. But now maybe some of our spiritual masters don't want. They feel that the time is over. It could be, and they want to prepare for moving on. But for Krishna can do, but then, yes, who decides? And because we have our desire that this so-and-so spiritual master or person should survive and serve Krishna some more. But the question is, if the person wants it himself, and if Krishna wants it, what's the plan? What is the divine plan? Okay, so that way. What's the divine plan? What are Krishna's desire? Because that is also in the prayer to Prabhupada, was that part of it was that if you so desire. Okay, Hare Krishna.
How should we take numerous instances in Shastras of numbers of sons, guardians, etc., that go against what is physically possible? It is one thing when it is said that Krishna had 16,108 wives and 10 sons with each of them, but when it is stated that King Sagara had 60,000 sons and King Ugrasena had some ludicrous number.
Ridiculous.
But it's written ludicrous. Ridiculous number of guards. One cannot help thinking that those are just poetic exaggerations.
I had a roommate when I was in college. He wasn't a student, but I had a roommate who was my friend. We were doing yoga together. We joined the movement together and moved into the temple at the same time. Later on, he was strange then, but he became stranger later on. And one time he went to Prabhupada, Śrila Prabhupada, and him and another devotee started to challenge Prabhupada about the same thing. How can we believe, Prabhupada, these exaggerations in the scripture? How can any intelligent person accept that King Ugrasena had 4 quadrillion bodyguards? And what to speak of 32 million personal tutors for Krishna's children? How is it possible that any rational person can accept this? So Prabhupada's answer was, you don't have to accept it. It's not necessary to accept it. Of course, they also didn't want to accept the 4 of the principles. So Prabhupada said, you don't have to accept it. You know, Prabhupada also mentioned, if you don't want to cut your hair, that's all right. But you're not, unless you cut your hair, then you're not my disciple. So Prabhupada said, you're free. He said, go out and enjoy. You're free to do it. You don't have to accept any of this. On the other hand, what is the difference to us whether Krishna had 16,108 wives, or, as Prabhupada said one place, 1 billion family members? What is the difference? How does that affect us? We're not maintaining any of them. If he had one wife and one child, it makes no difference. We're still eternal spiritual beings. We're not this body. We're still in the same illusion, no matter how many children Krishna has. So it's up to us to find the parts of the scripture that actually apply to us, that we can apply within our lives, to actually get out of the current illusion that we're in, and we can actually realize Krishna. Then we might be able to, at some point, appreciate how great Krishna is. But right now, because we're envious of Krishna, when we hear about how great he is, then we become disturbed. And we think this is irrational. And the bottom line is, if this is irrational, then the only rational thing is to break all the principles and enjoy the material world, because this whole thing is, Krishna consciousness is just a fairy tale. And the only real reality is to go and enjoy in the material world. So it's not necessary to read these books, to read 10th canto Srimad Bhagavatam, hear about Krishna's pastimes in Dwarka, hear about how great Krishna is, because unless we're willing to follow the principles of devotional service and to understand things, how we're eternal, how the super soul is in our heart, what to speak of having Krishna 16,108 wives. Krishna is in the heart of every ant, directing every ant. How is he doing that? How can any of us know how Krishna is doing it? We don't even know how Krishna is directing us within the heart most of the time. What to speak of an ant? So let's find out the basic things that's within our realm of experience, so we can do something about, to realize, and then later on maybe some of these things will become more within our realm of faith, of conviction. But right now we don't even have enough knowledge to have a proper perspective on things, what to speak of conviction, which goes beyond our conceptions right now, because we're very, very limited. So unless we become a little humble and realize how limited we are, then we become envious when we find out how great Krishna is.
Sorry. Is this on? No. Okay. More reflection on that question about the wife wanting to follow more strictly than the husband. They're present here in this assembly are several devotional ladies who've lived for decades as good wives and good devotees, and although every situation is individual and your situation is not going to be the same as them, they've seen a lot in their own life and in others' lives, and you could approach them for guidance. Another question is here. In the Nectar of Devotion, the offenses to be avoided, it says to avoid wearing red and blue, specifically in the temple room, I believe that is. I've heard conflicting answers of whether or not you can wear it, which is correct. Can we wear red and blue in the temple room? When Śrila Prabhupada was asked about this, I read this in a transcript of one of his conversations, or maybe questions and answers at the end of a class. Śrila Prabhupada's answer was something like this, I don't remember the exact words, that why should you not wear red and blue in the temple room? Because in Shastra it says you shouldn't wear red and blue in the temple room. That was Śrila Prabhupada's answer. what did I understand from this? One thing is that we can't understand everything that's in Shastra, but we should have the faith that there's a reason for that. We may not understand what the reason is, but we should follow it anyway. Reasons I can suggest: dark red cloth, or dark red or bright red, strongly red cloth, is worn by members of the Shakta Sampradaya, or those who are tantrics, whose principles are very much against those of Vaishnavism. Blue, exactly why I can't say. There may have been, at the time, this, I can only speculate, that it may be some other sampradaya that was prominent, but definitely the red is symbolic of tantrics and shaktas, who both of whom engage in activities, well, in animal killing specifically in the name of religion. At least one devotee reported that, that was actually Guru Kripa Swami at the time, reported that he was wearing dark red cloth, and when Śrila Prabhupada yelled at him, "Don't wear such dark color. It's not for Vaishnavas." On the other hand, it's not such a rule that we may strictly enforce. I'd love to enforce all these rules, but blue t-shirt over there, we're not going to throw you out just now. Maybe after. Actually, it's not a bad idea to wear a kurta also. You can get blue kurtas also. But dress code, as we've come to the topic of dress, it is supposed to be in these camps that everyone has what we call devotional dress, although there are certain Goswamis who don't believe there's any such thing as devotional dress. Any idea who I'm talking about?
I have no idea.
But okay, I can say this backwards in my sleep. I've said it so many times. It's just like if you're a policeman, or a policewoman for that matter, you have a certain uniform by which others can identify you, and you yourself feel like you're doing the job. You have a responsibility to do the job. And when all the police come together, they have a certain camaraderie and a certain understanding. So the dress is symbolic. What we wear is an expression of our mentality and our worldview. So at least in these gatherings, if we're not able to do so regularly in our secular life, most of you who are present here have various responsibility outside the direct purview of devotional service. At least when we come together, this is our real life, is it not? You may be husbands and housewives and doctors and farmers or whatever you may be, but our real life is to be devotees, and we identify as. Śrila Prabhupada has given us this, the Acharyas have given us this. Bhaktivinoda Thakur sings, Gaura Priya Jana Vesha Dadhana Tilak Tulasi Mala Shobhamana. When discussing that which is favorable for devotional service, he states that I would like to wear the kind of dress which is dear to the devotees of Lord Chaitanya, and to have tilak and tulasi mala. So these are items which are favorable for devotional service. You can be Krishna conscious in jeans and t-shirts, but Krishna prefers this kind of dress, and Krishna conscious means to do what Krishna likes. So at least in this assembly, we should dress like that. Red and blue, If it's in the Shastra and it's given by Krishna, we can take it that, well, Krishna doesn't like that. Otherwise, why is it in Vaishnava Shastra? So that's what it ultimately comes down to. Blue jeans are part of the commonly worn, and if people come to our temples, we may not ask them not to wear blue jeans. We're happy if anyone comes. But for those who have imbibed the principle of acting for the pleasure of Krishna, then at least when we come to his temple, we should dress in a way that is more pleasing to him. Just like if we were granted an audience with the Queen of England, the most respected person probably in the world, among the people in general in the world, we wouldn't go in shorts and flip-flops or barefoot and dirty feet and a t-shirt with a silly motto on it. We would dress in what is considered a respectable manner. So how much more important it is to come before Krishna, who is, of course, far more important than any important person in this world. So exactly why? Śrila Prabhupada gave the answer, because it's in Shastra. Exactly the reasoning behind it, Śrila Prabhupada didn't want to give at that time. And if we research deeply in the Shastras, we'll probably find some reason. But we can simply accept. Shastra says, we should follow.
Okay.
Maharaj, you got a loaded question if you like to answer.
Is it personal or?
I don't know, it's written initials. I don't know.
Okay, good. Okay, it's a
Give me that.
question to me before SKM, Smita Krishna Maharaj. So it says, it's like this. I see sannyasis with expensive watches and iBooks that cost thousands of euros. Is a sannyasi obliged to accept expensive gifts from his disciples?
It's like an iPad.
You could hear? Yeah. Well, Prabhupada accepted, well, okay, are you obliged? Because we are, the sannyasis and spiritual masters are dedicated to serving Krishna. And they are free, they're not necessarily, they're not obliged to accept. But there is maybe an obligation or as a reciprocating a loving exchange. So Prabhupada accepted gifts and watches as a way of reciprocating with the devotees' affection, and they want to give something, so they want to give the best for Śrila Prabhupada, and maybe then for someone who's present, whose guru is present now, may also want to give something nice. Then if we are obliged, well then we maybe, if we get obliged, I understand, obliged means we kind of, well we're not, if we feel we are forced or by the gifts manipulated in some way, that could be a concern, then that's not that kind of obligation. If there's some condition connected to the gifts. What is mentioned is watches and iBooks. This sounds like mostly practical things that you use in the service of the Lord. And now as a relative, what is now an expensive book, iBook. I don't. And watch how expensive to be expensive.
Anything above 50 euros.
Okay, I will keep that in mind. But then is sannyasi obliged? No, sannyasi should not be obliged, but maybe feel obliged or to reciprocate the exchange. If there is, depending, no, I say sannyas. Because if you just sannyas, but if you have disciples also, then you become spiritual master. And then there it could be a slightly different situation. But one should be careful. And in any case, I thought of a small house here at the BVKS, and all of a sudden something manifested that was quite interesting, bigger than I thought. But then, now again, that has been a gift, a work of love of my disciples to do something nice for me. You're trying to reciprocate that. And otherwise, then also the proper writes in the books. There's an example of the Mayavadis, or the devotee will see at the thing and see how it can be used for Krishna's service. And the Mayavadi says it's all Maya, it's all illusion. So we say it's not all illusion, it's all Krishna's energy, and it should be used in Krishna's service, and we should be careful, but we in a responsible position with disciples should be careful not to be bought, obliged, but be empowered to speak strongly and freely, as BVKS Swami shows. Hare Krishna. Śrila Prabhupada ki jai.
I'd like to add something to that. I'm surprised that I haven't heard any criticism about all this equipment, which costs a lot of money. I don't even know how much exactly. It's a lot. This is all Rishikesh Prabhu, who seems to be... Oh, he's right there. It's all his idea. When he started all this, I was not very eager. I thought, well, if people want to hear, they can hear. What does it matter, all this? But it may be particularly because of the smartphone age and the internet age, and people want to see as well as hear. So he's making the sound and the audio-visual optimum up to professional standards, and all this stuff costs money. I think this was hired locally, these lights. I don't think we're carrying them around with us. They must be hired locally. Carrying one, I don't know how we do it, but somehow. Yeah, and it costs money, excess baggage, and it's a hassle and this and that, but we are hearing that devotees are appreciating, and they're appreciating hearing what I, as one of the many servants of Śrila Prabhupada, am trying to deliver. So that's an example of yukta. I hope that can be accepted as an example of yukta vairagya, anasaktasya vishayan, Anasaktasya vishayam yataham upayanjataha nibandha Krishna sambandhe yuktam vairagya muchyate. It's also useful to have some electrical device here for when I forget my verses, which is very often, and just type it in and then find it out. While trying to maintain the spirit of not being attached, I probably wasn't the only one when I heard the question being read out, looking at Smita Krishna Maharaja's watch. And so it looks to be like one of those cheapo watches that all three of us have. If you see a black strap and a black plastic, it's probably not very expensive. I just bought a new watch, by the way, because my old one...
It's not a Rolex.
It's not a Rolex. It's not even an imitation Rolex? The devotees used to wear, some of them. So, without being attached to anything of this world, one should utilize what is in the world, seeing its relationship with Krishna. So personally, we don't want to accept anything for our own aggrandizement or sense gratification, but if we can use it in Krishna's service, let it be used. If there's something worthwhile saying, let it be delivered. Why should only the karmis have all the best facilities to deliver their nonsense message? So,
one time, Śrila Maharaj wrote to Prabhupada about buying a new vehicle, and Prabhupada said you should get the best vehicle, that the devotee should travel. They should have a first-class vehicle. And that time Prabhupada came to Dallas, and we picked up Prabhupada in a new vehicle. Prabhupada was very happy that he was picked up in a new vehicle, considering some of the other vehicles he was picked up in. Didn't quite make it to the temple sometime. I remember one sannyas candidate, we were having very difficulty with him year after year. And then one time during the one of the legal problems that ISKCON got into, it required a lot of money. He told us that he'd collect $2 million if we give him sannyas right away. And our reply was that sannyas is not so cheap.
Very good reply. Very good reply.
This is the last one. Zucker kommt zuletzt, as the Germans say. Zucker kommt zuletzt. Sugar comes in the end. It's an interesting question.
Same as Bhagavad Gita.
Why are chandalas considered so polluting in the Dharma-shastras? It is understandable why one should not have intimate exchanges with them, but it is really difficult to understand why the act of merely seeing or touching them pollutes one. This is probably one major reason why Dalits strongly oppose so-called Hinduism, and it seems almost impossible to defend Dharma-shastras in this respect.
Well, I guess we can all answer it. When Yajivagre Vartate Nama Tubhyam Aho Bhata Swapato To Gariyan.
Yajivagre.
Yes. How wonderful. Aho Bhata Swapato To Gariyan Jivagre Vartate Nama Tubhyam. How wonderful it is that if a chandala, one who eats dogs, paka means to cook, and swa means a dog. So one who cooks dogs is, here we don't like cooking. When we hear about cooking dogs, we think that's horrible. But if you go to the Philippines and China, people become very enlivened when they hear about cooking dogs. That they're not considered at all low. As I told the story one time, one lady, true story, she was in Hong Kong, and she had just had her poodle groomed, so it looked like a masterpiece, something you put in a museum. And she went to a Chinese restaurant, very fancy Chinese restaurant, and it didn't allow dogs inside. So she gave the dog to the doorman, pointed to the dog, but he didn't understand he didn't understand English. She thought he did. So she went in, she ordered her meal, and she got a special side dish that she didn't order. She was very satisfied. And she walked down and asked the doorman for her dog, and he pointed to his stomach. So she was quite disappointed. So this idea of swapacho to garyan, yajivat gray vartate namatu upyam. I'll ask how it's possible that if one is even a swapacha, a chandala, a dog eater, that if that one chants the holy name, he can become purified. And if one doesn't chant the holy name, then one remains in the same contaminated position as they were before. As Prabhupada used to say about this movement of Gandhi, to give everyone, to give the Harijans, the name, the lowest, the sweepers, the name of Harijans so they can go into the temple. Prabhupada said that's just artificial. What will they benefit? They won't understand what's going on inside the temple. They'll simply commit offense, and they'll be contaminating. But there's a process of actual purification if people are willing to take it up, and that's available to everyone. That everyone can chant Hare Krishna. There's no restriction in terms of caste, creed, and color, and therefore that was the Śrila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada's mission, to establish Krishna consciousness as transcendental beyond these restrictions, and that if one takes it up, that one will become purified and transcendental also. So there is no looking down on anyone. It's just a question of whether people are willing to take up a process that will actually elevate themselves, or if they're determined to remain on a lower platform but take up a false designation, which is common in this age. And they did an interview in one man about my size. He did an interview with students at the University of Oregon, in Portland, Oregon, and he asked them that right now I believe I'm a 6'10" Chinese woman. Now if I told you I was a 6'10" Chinese woman, would you believe me? And the students, at least that he put on the video, were all saying, yes, if you feel like that, that's who you are. So that's common in this age. Everyone thinks that if you just feel like something, then you become that something. But that's all just illusory. That one actually has to qualify, as Prabhupada said, first deserve and then desire. So we should qualify ourselves and then desire, not that we just remain in the same low position and we imagine ourselves to be in some other position.
Yeah. I can add to that in a more technical way, that in worship of the deities there is consideration of ritual purity and impurity. If one touches stool, even one's own stool, and one may be a brahmana, but if one touches even one's own stool, as one does when cleaning after passing stool, or if blood is coming from the body, then one has to bathe before one can worship the deity. Brahmanas are generally involved in deity worship. And chandalas, they don't follow rules of purity. And they're engaged in activities like cleaning up stool, taking out dead bodies. So they are considered to be always ritually impure. That means by their activities, they're not in a position to worship deities or recite the Vedas. Talking about the Vedas here. Shruti. And contamination spreads by touch. If you touch stool, you become contaminated. If you touch someone who has touched stool and hasn't bathed, you become contaminated. Which is one reason why women are not engaged in temple worship. Home deity worship they can do when they're bathed and clean, but generally they're looking after babies, and babies are always impure because their emanations are always coming out from their bodies. They don't have control over them. So for this reason, to touch a chandala is considered contaminating. And there's also a matter of consciousness, because one has to be in pure consciousness to worship the deity, to recite the Vedas, and so on. And chandalas are generally in low consciousness, and to associate with them can be polluting to the consciousness. These are all considerations within varnashram dharma, which are very difficult for people who are raised in this egalitarian ethos to understand, where you think that everyone is equal in all respects and everyone can do whatever they like. If you like, you can imagine yourself to be a 6'10" tall Chinese woman, even if plainly you are not. So that's one consideration. That it was taken to extremes that are outside the essence. The essence is we should serve Krishna properly, or any deity who we're worshipping, and therefore there are certain, just like I gave that example, if you want to go to see the Queen of England, you have to be properly dressed. So similarly, if we have to worship Krishna, we have to be properly dressed, properly clean, ritually pure. We don't go after not bathing for 5 days and the body is stinking. We have to be clean ritually, which also helps to keep the consciousness pure if we regularly bathe. But that, as always happens, shastras and shastric injunctions and restrictions are misused, misunderstood, and misused. That happens in every religious tradition. And Śrila Prabhupada himself, once he expressed great distaste. He was talking about South India, how the Brahmins, they won't even the shadow of the chandalas, if that comes on them, they feel impure. So Śrila Prabhupada was not very happy with that. So there may be Dharma-shastras which are also compiled by persons who are not fully in Krishna consciousness, or who are not catering to people, or catering to people who are not fully in Krishna consciousness, which is suitable for them at their level. Particularly Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he wanted to purify the Vaishnava Sampradaya in Bengal from the many contaminations which had entered it. One of the major ones, we've heard so much about the Sahajiyas, but there's also, on the other side of the spectrum, the Smartas, who are so much concerned about rules that they've obscured the essence altogether. And yes, that's used by politicians in India to try to turn Dalits against what they when you say Dalits go against Hinduism, they're not considered part of the caste system, and the modern Hindu preachers want to say no, they are part of the Hindu system. And once we get into social considerations, it becomes very complex. But as Prahladananda Maharaja was stating, we can cut through all of that by coming to the transcendental platform of chanting the holy names of Krishna and all join together without consideration of higher or lower according to birth. In social dealings that may be there still, but in the kirtan everyone joins together. I still have a few questions here, maybe I can give them to others also. There's no particular reason why these questions are given to me, I don't know. So, want to take that one?
Okay, let's see. Let's see. During the Canterbury...
Oh, that is specifically for me, yeah. but there are others in that sheet, yeah, okay. Okay. This one you can please take.
I take this.
Yeah, please.
This page here only. That's questions from Maharaj in general. Okay. Does Krishna have different forms in Vrindavan? Krishna, in Vrindavan, Krishna Loka, or when it comes to different planets in general. That was that one. Well, he has his Krishna reciprocates with the devotees. So in Vrindavan,
Do you think you
in Vrindavan, Krishna Loka. Okay. Sorry. Well, he certainly reciprocates with his devotees. I mean, like Mother, of course, and he doesn't really. Well, he takes on the shapes and forms that is needed for the pastimes. So in Vrindavan, there's different pastimes, but he's from the small child up to 15 years something, and then he goes outside of Vrindavan. So he can take the form he needs, or exhibit the pastimes he likes, as he likes, and but in Vrindavan, that's Krishna, 2 arms, blue. Beautiful boy, young boy. That's more specific. And then different planets in general. Well, then we have the Vaikuntha level where he is as Narayan with 4 arms and having loving pastimes with his devotees in the Vaikuntha mood. Okay, and that's what I can say.
Oh, there's...
How can devotees stay inspired in devotional service when our minds sometimes give us complications? Well, sometimes give us complications, and you're doing quite well. One time, Giriraj Maharaj was walking with Śrila Prabhupada, and Śrila Prabhupada made some philosophical comment, and Giriraj Maharaj said, "Prabhupada, I was in Maya, I didn't understand that." And Prabhupada started to chuckle and said, "You were in Maya?" He said, "You're always in Maya." So our mind's always giving us complications, what to speak of sometimes. But still we go on with our devotional service. We remember what our duties are in devotional service, and we perform them to satisfy Guru and Krishna and the devotees, and Krishna will help us. Gradually he'll reveal himself, Tesham Sadatam Yuktanam Bhajantam Priti Purvakam Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam Yena Mam Upayanti Te. As we try to be steady and enthusiastic in our service, then Krishna will give us our intelligence by how we can make progress. And then when he sees we're sincere, in spite of all the difficulties we're going through, then he'll reveal himself within our heart with a shining lamp of knowledge, the darkness born of ignorance, and we'll be in ecstasy. And that will purify our hearts of all their complications. Prabhupada said if you have a child and he's trying to learn how to walk, he may fall down sometimes. But the parents are always encouraging him to get up and walk, try to walk. Not that the child, he tries a couple of times and he falls down, and the parents look at him and say, hey kid, it only took me 3 times, that's your 4th time. I'm not so sure where you came from, No, the parents are always encouraging the child, please get up and walk, and eventually he will walk. And then in the course of time, he'll dance in ecstasy. So we should just try the best we can. And if we're sincere and we try the best we can, Krishna will help us, and gradually we'll come to the pure platform of devotional service.
Shall I
Yeah.
take one? Okay. Someone has asked, during the Canterbury Sravana Kirtana Camp, that's Canterbury in England, where I just came from, there was a lecture where BVKS said, we are living in uncertainty. Yeah, I suppose that we are living in uncertain times. I might have misheard, but he then said, but due to the grace of material energy, there is some certainty. If this is true, may he explain how. If this is not true, is there anything in this world that is certain? I don't remember exactly what I said, but as far as I remember, I was talking about how people have a sense of certainty. By the material energy, they feel that life is going on, and it's going on like this, and it'll always go on like this, and there'll always be food in the supermarket, and everything will always be nice, and the sun is shining, and that's Maya. That sense of certainty, of complacency. So I was saying that people are feeling that things are not so certain. Maybe there won't be food in the supermarket. Maybe we'll get some Russian missiles on our heads. The supply chains are being disrupted, so we won't be able to get the latest iPad or iPhone whenever it comes out. And we won't have a job, and the forests are all burning down because they were talking about global warming, and they said it's going to happen, and now it's happening. And there's a sense of uncertainty, which in that talk I was saying it should be good for preaching Krishna consciousness. What is certain in this world? Birth, death, old age, and disease. Probably in every language there is a saying, as sure as death. It's there in English. Is it there in Croatian, Czech? Yes.
Croatians, we're going to live forever.
On the beach. So that's my answer to this. The sense of certainty is Maya, but there are some things that are certain. But the things that are certain, we don't want to think about. That's Maya. Birth, death, old age, and disease is certain, but we don't want to think about it. And the things that are certainly temporary, such as my house, my wife, my dog, my cat, these things we like to think, as in fairy stories, and they lived happily ever after. But that is a fairy story. That is not a real story. So that's that answer in brief. You want to take that? Sorry. Yeah.
So this, I am, let's see, this is addressed to BVKS Maharaja. I read it, take it. I am new in practicing Krishna consciousness.
Already answered it.
I have been let's see. I'm new to practice Krishna consciousness. I have been practicing for 4 months. Or what is it for? 11 months. I have enough faith that I want to control my sex, but I am realizing that when I get corrected by devotees, as well as my peers, that I mirror the way they approach me, and then get labeled as rude or puffed up. How can I see the stubbornness in a Krishna conscious way and respond in a way that's favorable for my devotional life? But lately I've been learning how this determined, how it's determined to one devotional, is detrimental to one's devotional life to blaspheme devotees. But I feel like they are blaspheming me. Okay, maybe that's... Yeah, we shouldn't blaspheme devotees, but then depending on our position, we may correct. If you're guru, you're supposed to you correct your disciple. If the parents correct the child, and teacher the student. So if we correct where it's appropriate according to our position, then it's not blasphemy. Of course, there may be many aspects to it here that I don't fully understand. But okay, if you don't like something, how they correct us or so, then maybe we just go on and chant Hare Krishna in any case, and take it as a challenge to overcome, in spite of someone not being so happy with me. Maybe still go on and serve the Lord and His devotees to our best capacity. Thank you.
I have a question. I don't think there's anything more there. Regarding initiation, it's specifically given to me, or that could be answered back. You want to answer it? It's not.
Is it?
No, it's specifically given to me.
Maharaj, can you please tell us about the importance of getting initiation from a spiritual master? I have often heard that the initiation rite itself is just a formality. So my question is, isn't it enough to find a guru and serve him? Why do we actually need to go through the initiation rite? What happens when you go through that ceremony? Well, I guess in many places, people wondering, what is the value of getting married, for instance? We can just live together. And why go through the formality? As one devotee lady, she went to her mother. She was not married and living with one other devotee for 20 years, and they had 3 children. So she went to her mother and said, "Mom, we finally decided to get married." And her mother took her hand and said, "Are you sure he's the right man?" So everything we do, it has a purpose, you know. If you make a commitment before the fire, I mean, after all, although throwing grains in a fire is not the end of the process. Similarly, marriage is, if you simply get married, it's not the end of the process. But generally speaking, in most civilized countries, which are very few left, then marriage was a ceremony where there is a commitment that 2 people would make, and it was before the elders, it was before the fire, or before others, and they take it seriously, because they actually had respect for the supreme law, they had respect for the elders, they had respect for the process. And therefore, when they made the commitment, it itself helped them fulfill that commitment. But nowadays, people don't make any commitment, and they don't keep any commitments, because they don't make any commitments. So initiation is a commitment that I'm going to give up my false ego and become the servant of the servant of the servant. That's who I'm going to identify myself with. And if one takes initiation and doesn't have that commitment, that by becoming a servant, by vowing to, for instance, chant 16 rounds, follow the 4 of the principles, and become a servant of the Guru, and the Guru teaches me how to become a servant of the other devotees appropriately. If we don't understand what the commitment is, and I maintain my false ego, even after making that commitment, then the initiation may not be very valuable. But if I take initiation with the commitment that now, from now on, I'm going to identify myself as the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna, and gives up one's false ego and at least tries to act on that basis, then one will make great progress in spiritual life. On the other hand, if one thinks there's no one who's worthy of my surrender, and that there's no one I have to surrender to, and therefore I surrender to my mind, and I keep my false ego, and at the same time I chant Hare Krishna, then progress will be very slow. As Prabhupada writes in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, then anyone who thinks he's beyond consulting with any superior, including a bona fide spiritual master, then his advancement in devotional service is just going to be illusory. So there's a purpose behind it, but there's also a consciousness that has to be behind it. Otherwise, it may not be so valuable to the devotee. I mean, we know of devotees, the first initiation, 26 Second Avenue, where Prabhupada gave initiation to sometimes people who just appeared. For that first time they got initiated, and then they disappeared. And no one ever heard about them again. So Prabhupada gave them a chance, but they didn't take advantage of it. So they didn't understand what it was actually about.
Hare Krishna. Almost time for the Sandhya Arati. We shall continue tomorrow evening with the same. I thought of having this questions and answers session because some of the devotees from Atlanta came to me with pages of written questions, but I didn't see any of your questions today. So you can write them out and we can go through them. Hare Krishna.
Hare
All glories to His Divine Grace. Śrila Prabhupada.
Yeah.
Prahladananda Maharaj ki jai.